Yeah, I know, this movie, it's something. By the way, spoilers for Madame Web, not that I don't think anyone really cares. Yeah, Madame Web is an awful movie. Let's just put it like that. And I'm going to break down why. There are 3 key elements to this movie's downfall that I really think held it back in so many major ways. Like, if these 3 things, if they managed to get these 3 things right, I think it would have been an okay movie. It wouldn't have been the best thing to ever grace the cinema screen, but it would have been something a little better than actually what it was. And the most criminal thing, and that's number 1, and what we're going to start with, is the writing. The absolute number 1 rule of anything that you write, whether it's a film, whether it's a novel, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a comic book, whatever it is, your number 1 rule in writing is show, do not tell. Should I have to explain why? For those of you who don't really understand why that's a key rule, I'm just going to briefly explain why. Show don't tell is basically a rule that dictates how you tell a story. Showing and not telling could be as simple as visually showing the story to the audience rather than telling it through dialogue or narration, or it could be as complex as hinting towards the narrative through meta commentary through little bits of dialogue. So showing and not telling is really, really important to a story, and Madame Web does not do any of it. The whole film is just the characters explaining the plot to us. It's basically like getting force-fed when you're a baby. It is really, really frustrating because this film acts as if its audience are a bunch of 5-year-olds. So basically, the main character trait of our main character, Cassandra Webb, is that she kind of hates everything family-orientated. And the whole film is about her basically adopting these 3 teenagers that she then takes on board as she has to try to save them. And she has a whole mummy issues thing, like she doesn't really like her mother for abandoning her. And the way that they tell us that she has mummy issues is essentially in a scene with Uncle Ben. I know, Uncle Ben. She basically says, "Oh, I don't like family events," after she gets invited to a Ben Parker family event. And it's really, really weird because they could have just shown it instead. Instead of telling us that she doesn't like family events, they could have shown her going to the event and not really enjoying herself. Then the audience would question why isn't she enjoying herself? And this would create intrigue within the character. What's gone on in her past for her not to like this event? And then obviously you could slowly reveal information later on in the movie, which would start to piece the puzzle together. But no, they straight up tell us that she doesn't like family events straight from the off, which, you know, okay, you've told us now. We don't really need to see it. You've told us. It doesn't matter anymore. The film does this pretty much for every character throughout the entire runtime. Other 3 girls played by Sydney Sweeney, obviously playing Julia Carpenter, Celeste O'Connor playing Mattie Franklin, and of course Isabella Merced playing Anya Corazon. They are the other 3 Spider-Women throughout this film. I say Spider-Women, we don't actually see them as the Spider-Women. They basically only get their costumes and their powers off screen and in flashbacks or flash forwards. What? These characters get exactly the same fate as Cassandra Webb. We are never shown anything to do with their past. We are never shown what type of people they are. All we get to know about them is what they tell us through dialogue and exposition. We get told about their pasts, we get told about their parents, we get told about who they are as people. They rarely act out, or they rarely show us what kind of pasts they have had and why they act in the way that they do. It's really, really weird, and I'm sorry, but to go from something like No Way Home, where it has a lot of these features, these high-quality story beats, these high-quality writing tropes, and then to go to something like Madame Web is really, really jarring. How did this script get off the writing room floor? I have no idea. Speaking of characters, let's talk about Uncle Ben and Mary Parker, who are played by Adam Scott and Emma Roberts, respectively. This is genuinely the most useless version and use of the Parkers that I have ever seen. They shouldn't have even put them in this movie. It's so crazy to me that they've made a Spider-Man movie, included the Parkers, and the Parkers don't even matter to the story. Now, I think I know why this is, because originally, as we know, Sony Pictures were in talks with Andrew Garfield to try and make him a part of the Sonyverse. And then obviously when contract negotiations fell through with Andrew Garfield, they then wanted Tom Holland to be the Sonyverse Spider-Man. But nothing was concrete and nothing was worked out before Madame Web actually released in theaters. So we know that a few weeks before release, they actually had to go back throughout the film and cut out most of the concrete Spider-Man references that they actually had, which means the film felt a little bit disconnected, because that meant that the Parkers had no room in the story. And for those of you who have seen the film and think, no, they had relevancy throughout the film, let me tell you this. If you took out Uncle Ben and replaced him with any other character, would the role matter? No. It still wouldn't. Uncle Ben himself has no reason to be there. Mary Parker has no reason to be there. That could have been any other mother with any other baby. It doesn't have to be Peter Parker. And the thing is, if you're going to include characters with such magnitude to the overall mythos of the Spider-Man story, then they've got to have some relevancy there. You can't just throw Peter Parker in there, Mary Parker in there, Uncle Ben in there, if there's no reason for them to be there. Just make them new characters. Like, they might even be more interesting. The only reason why I was invested in the Mary Parker storyline was like, oh, well, we might get to see Peter Parker. That could be cool. But even then, it's like, I don't care, because these characters are so one-dimensional and are so written so poorly that it doesn't even matter. But yeah, they had no relevancy in the story. They had nothing to do with the plot of Madame Web, and they just threw them in there clearly to sell tickets. I don't know, they weren't even advertised in the trailer. I don't get, why are they even in this movie? But let's move on to performances, because the performances are also one of the things that I think is, I can't get over how bad. They look like they don't want to be there, especially Dakota Johnson. So Dakota Johnson, yeah, I mean, she's an okay actress. I've never really rated her as much as someone like, I don't know, Zendaya or Tom Holland or any of the main stars in the MCU movies. But Dakota Johnson here, like, this is probably one of the worst roles I've seen her in. She pretty much kills any chance of any good performance she has in any of the scenes that she's in. She genuinely just doesn't look like she wants to be there. She looks like an actress who kind of just like said yeah to the check and then just hasn't really cared about the character. Like, her performance is so stale and so uninspiring, and it feels like I'm watching a movie where Dakota Johnson is trying to act, rather than a movie where Dakota Johnson is playing a character that I am watching. Basically, the best way I can describe this is a fan film where you can tell that one of the actors doesn't want to be there and is only doing it because they're friends with the director. That's what it looks like. That's the type of performance I got from Dakota Johnson in this movie. And I think the same goes for Sydney Sweeney. I'm not saying Sydney Sweeney didn't want to be there, because Sydney Sweeney at least felt like she gave a better performance than Dakota Johnson. But the thing is, with Sydney Sweeney, and it's really weird, and I've heard a few people say this as well, is that she plays the same character in every single movie that she's in. And it gets really jarring here, because when the script is bad, and when she plays the same character that you've seen her in a million things before, it kind of feels like there's a massive disconnect. There's not anything to separate them. Like, for example, in Euphoria, her character is very similar to how she is in Madame Web. But the thing is, Euphoria's script is like a million times better than Madame Web's. In comparison, Madame Web makes Sydney Sweeney look like the most amateur actress in the whole world. By far, the best actress in the whole film was Celeste O'Connor. I actually felt like she gave a really good performance with what she had to work with. And I'm not gonna lie, if I wanted to see a spin-off Spider-Woman movie from one of the characters in Madame Web, it would definitely be Mattie Franklin, because I think Celeste O'Connor gave the most potential. And I think her character was the most interesting out of all of them as well. But let's move on to the main villain, Ezekiel Sims. So, yeah, he was awful as well, because every single scene, going back to what I said about the writing, is him literally just going, oh, we need to catch the 3 women before they kill me. I'm gonna kill them. And that was the whole movie. And you know what's even worse? The ADR was absolutely horrific. Every single scene sounded like Ezekiel Sims' voice lines were voiced over in a studio rather than on set. And it's really weird, because there's some scenes where his lips move, but it doesn't match the dialogue, and you can tell that it was done in post. But it's not just one scene, it's every scene. Was Tahar Rahim even on set? So the writing, the Parkers' irrelevancy, and also the really, really terrible performances are the 3 things that I think really dragged this movie down the most. I could sit here and nitpick for absolutely ages for this movie. I could basically run through the whole thing and tell you exactly what's wrong with it in every single scene and break down everything, and I would love to, but obviously I don't think we have time for that today. In terms of positive things, I think the cinematography was cool. It's got like its own identity in terms of the cinematography, in terms of the lighting, in terms of the overall atmosphere. It has its own sort of mid to early 2000s kind of vibe. I think a lot of superhero movies nowadays are made on a conveyor belt, so a lot of them look the same, a lot of them feel the same, a lot of them are made with the same color correction, are shot with very static, very boring looking camera angles, and this movie actually did something a bit different, which I thought was pretty nice. Even though the movie was really horrible, I think the cinematography at least was fun to look at because it was something a little bit different. It was something that we haven't really seen in a while. But either way, that is pretty much it for my Madame Web review. What do you think in the comment section down below? Did you like the movie? Did you not like the movie? I want to hear all your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Peace.